Our panel will be on gender-based discrimination, hate speech against LGBTI+. Now, our moderator, İdil Engindeniz, after obtaining an undergraduate degree at Galatasaray University in 2001, she completed her master's and doctoral studies at Université Standard Grenoble. She works as a lecturer at Galatasaray University. Her fields of study include public sphere, gender, journalism, communication ethics, and LGBTI+ studies. He supported us on our watch study on hate speech. We consult her a lot at every step of the way. Welcome, Ms. İdil Engindeniz. Now I'm giving the floor to you. This is quite special for me. Since 2012, I've been working with Hrant Dink Foundation, and I'm here now. In my personal life, Hrant Dink and our collaboration played an important role. I wanted to do something, and Hrant Dink Foundation helped me do it. Well, remembering certain stages in my past saddens me sometimes, but it also reinforced the feeling of fight, actually. Hate speech has many different forms, actually, has different sources. But there is something about it. It is very much related to the past. It takes its roots in the past conflicts, religions, past wars, and all of these affect today. So, depending on this past, every country, every society, they can be varied in terms of their acts of hatred towards certain groups. Women, LGBT+ members are the common groups that can be the target of hate speech. I conducted many studies with various associations, and one of the most important things that I learned is that we need to stand tall. We are not victims. Just to the contrary, despite all the conditions of this country, if we can talk about an organized LGBTI movement, knowing that it exists, knowing that it empowers people, is very important. It gives us the chance to be ourselves.
Trans children and adolescents, making the concealed visible. Trans children and adolescents were recently a subject of discussion within some LGBTIs and some feminists in Turkey, and it was a rough discussion. I hope that the first speech of this session will enlighten us about the situation of trans children and adolescents, about their or about our conditions. Koray Başar, I know him also via the Chaos GL, and recently I did a research about the representation of LGBTIs during the speech of Ali Erbaş, and he was one of the subjects saying that the discrimination is a very big problem about LGBTIs, especially during this pandemic time. And Koray Başar, he is graduated from Hacettepe University School of Medicine, Psychiatry. He's a faculty member in the Department of Psychiatry in Hacettepe University. He was trained in sexual therapy through ÇEDAT's program and served as an executive committee member in 2018-2020. Clinical and research interests include diversity in sexual development, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, the effects of discrimination on well-being of the individual and family, and gender-affirmative medical care. He holds monthly meetings with parents of LGBTI. He is the Secretary General of the Psychiatric Association of Turkey, and as a member of EPAS and WAPT, he contributes to the development of the 8th version of the standards of care for the health of trans and gender non-conforming people. And their contribution, I will say, because it's prepared by several persons, including Cesur, Kaptan, and Şahika, Yüksel. They will join us on question and answer parts. Thank you, Koray. I think you will do the presentation, so I can let you speak.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for your introduction. Let me share my screen with you. Hello, everyone. In the past 2 days, we have been listening very exciting presentations and speeches. I would like to thank everyone, all organizers, the science committee, all participants. This has been quite enjoyable. The four of us, 4 researchers, prepared this declaration, and we focused on groups that came to us in order to receive treatment because of gender identity. Gender identity is not a mental disorder in itself, but because of the features of gender identity, they are subjected to stigmatization and discrimination in the society. This is why they seek help, they seek support. So we have findings, clinical observations, and I am going to try to summarize all our findings and recommendations in 15 minutes as fast as I can. Now, with regards to gender identity, it can be tackled in various dimensions. It is quite diverse, actually. Actually, gender cannot be limited to the genitals that you have when you are born. This is what the order dictates us to do. This is why sometimes we miss the diversity there. Well, in terms of the features that are related to gender identity, we cannot have certain categories. We cannot have only 2 categories of sex, actually. There is a diversity there, but because of the common approach, they are assigned with a gender at birth. But when they are 18 to 24 months old, their mental development differs, and they can start seeing them in one or more than one categories of sex, or in none of them. Just like corporal or societal differences, they can demonstrate certain differences when it comes to their sex, when it comes to their gender, and they have a certain manner of manifesting them. Their bodily features are also manifested in different ways. We cannot limit the categories there to 2 only. There is a diversity there, as I said before. So there is the gender defined at birth and the gender identity. Sometimes they match, but sometimes they do not match. In that case, in general, it's called trans individuals, but it is not a homogeneous group. There could be a high level of diversity within that group itself as well. Sometimes they deny all categories of sex, all categories of gender. But this diversity, when we try to limit it to binary sexual category, it means that we ignore such people. Gender dysphoria or gender incongruence is the medical terms. These people suffer from such medical conditions. When the diversity in gender expression is not in line with the perceptions of society, such problems occur. This starts in very early periods of life. Let's see how prevalent it is. We can see the percentages of such people, their ratio in the population of countries. It can seem quite rare when we look at these figures, but when we look at samples, we can see that the studies show us that this is actually more prevalent than these figures. There are different ratios actually. We can see that, but we can see approximately that 1 out of 200 people has such features. Well, there was a study that was conducted in Sweden, which says that 2% is the rate, and an important part of it. An important part of the society, 1 out of 200 people seeks medical help because of such features, because of such characteristics. Well, we feel that we belong to a certain sex and we relate to that certain bodily and societal features. There's a large spectrum there. Our bodily and societal features, we try to adapt them accordingly. This is a dynamic process. Well, we all do this. When transgender people do this, this process is called gender transit process. Why is this the subject of medicine now? Because since the last century, some medical procedures were applied, hormone therapies have been applied. Now it's possible to do this. So, some psychiatric diagnoses were invented. These people were treated. I mean, this diagnosis category was defined because these people needed help in certain ways, and some standards were started to be built by various professional organizations. And this is what we follow as well in our work. So, in the transition process, first of all, we carry out a psychiatric evaluation. This is not only regarding the diagnosis, but the gender congruence, gender conformity process. And then there's a hormone therapy that are revocable. And then we have less revocable or irrevocable surgical procedures. There are international standards regarding all these prepared by clinicians. There is then a legal process that they go through. Inequality in healthcare. If we belong to a group, we can be subjected to certain inequalities. We can be more disadvantaged in bodily or mental health conditions. This actually, your gender identity doesn't make you sick in terms of bodily features, but we see that their level of suicide attempts or their level of mental disorder is higher among such individuals. If they go through a gender transition process, a gender conformity process, this rate goes down. There are some studies conducted in Turkey. I'm not going to read them one by one, but when we look at the evaluations, the examinations we conducted on people that came to us, we see that the prevalence of mental disorder is quite high as compared to the remaining part of the society. And there is a higher number of suicide attempt histories. The mean age that came to us is 24. It shows us that suicide attempts come in the early periods of life, in childhood or in adolescence. So this inequality is societal. Therefore, we use the minority stress model. This is related to the society's perspective towards this group. We talk about a chronic stress here. For example, when it comes to gender identity, these people are subject to discrimination, they are rejected, they are deprived of their rights, they are not affirmed, or they are prevented from fulfilling their potential. These are external stress factors. There are also internal stress factors. They internalize transphobia, they have negative expectations from life, or they hide themselves. They feel like they're in danger, actually. There are many studies on these issues. Unfortunately, I'm not able to go to detail at this point. And in order to protect them, some implementations are used. So what can they do? They can be in contact with people that are like them, and protecting their honor, protecting their pride can also be helpful. Well, trans individuals in Turkey, they are subjected to discrimination and violence in various ways in the society. This is what the studies show us. There is a follow-up study carried out in Turkey. It started in 2008. And according to their findings, Turkey is the country with the highest number of trans murders. This is not only related to hate crimes or hate murders, but they are also deprived of the healthcare system. They are subject to discrimination in that sense. Excuse me, I just would like to remind you of your time limit. You have 4 or 5 minutes left.
Another aspect is that that is different from other groups that are subjected to discrimination as well. The family of the individual does not share this information on the identity, which means that the family itself can turn into a source of pressure on transsexuals. So that is an additional challenge for them. If a person is a trans individual in Turkey and has a different experience from what is expected of its gender, there is no legal regulation in place that will protect the individual from any attack, and lack of criminality seems to be an issue as well if the individual is subjected to any act of violence, and they have to deal with quite a burdensome procedure when it comes to going ahead with some surgical procedures, and access to such services is very challenging, is only available in a limited number of healthcare facilities, and not always covered by social security institutions or system. These are both legal and other type of challenges, and lack of social support is also another issue. And international studies show that social support can work as a buffer in such cases. When it comes to the cases in Turkey, we can clearly see negative impact of the discrimination on the quality of life and the rest, but social support, family and from family and friend circles can have an important protective impact. When it comes to international studies, the social support is lower in trans community compared to the rest of the society. And when it comes to Turkey, family support and social support as well seems to be lower for trans community. I am showing you on this slide the follow-up study carried out in Hacettepe University. We have a 9-month assessment process, which is followed by the PS support, psychosocial support, and hormone treatment of 12 months. So strengthening support systems can increase life quality in and improve quality of life even without surgical support. So in all of these areas, it is possible to achieve positive development. Across Turkey, LGBTI families were gathered together, accompanied by psychiatrists and psychologists, and that seems to be very important. And the earlier it occurs, the better it is. And in the number of applications, there is a decrease, and people are also applying in younger ages. We have to thus focus our energy on the adolescence period, and as per a small-scale study we carried out in Turkey, close to half of these individuals have some mental disorders, and 1/4 of them have attempted suicide in the past. And they are faced with threat of violence, either physical or psychological, and close to 80% of them are aware of their difference before the age of 12. And the proportion of those who are able to communicate with family members and seek medical help seems to go even lower. And that eventually leads to huge risks when it comes to mental disorders and suicide attempts. And that is the same trend can be observed across the world as well. So we are more and more focusing on what can be done with children, and for adolescents. And this is widely discussed. What is done in this period is that the individual can be given certain medication, but we're not talking about a hormone treatment. What is done is not to push a person into a specific gender, but stopping or halting adolescence to free the individual from this discomfort, allowing the individual to discover their gender identity, ensure compliance with the family and the society. This practice is being conducted in a select number of facilities in Turkey, and that is an approach that is adopted across the world as well. And when this is not done, the individual should be supported, and social support must be strengthened for the individual. That is also possible. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if this practice is not adopted, then nothing else can be done. From a social point of view, we no longer allow the judges or the doctors have the final say, do something else before we come to that stage. And it is a right to healthcare of the individual before anything. And healthcare services should not wait for the age of 18, otherwise it would have significant consequences. And everyone that has a gender dysphoria should be allowed access to relevant healthcare services. Before we start to be concerned about the consequences, about the situation, we have to turn this into an opportunity and strengthen these people from a mental point of view and make sure that they have a social support. We should be able to do that, but first and foremost, we have to increase the number of healthcare professionals that have been trained on the subject, and healthcare services should be transformed so that they cover and meet all of the different needs and requirements. Those who are faced with discrimination should be assessed in terms of the extent to which they are affected by discrimination, and we have to make sure that they become advocates and have the capacity to act as advocates. So at the end of this presentation, I'd like to extend my greetings, taking this opportunity to my colleagues, Şahika, Yüksel, Selen, Kaptan, and Cesur, and all of the individuals and their families who contributed to this study. Thank you very much. Thank you. In fact, we can find solutions before things turn into problems, because we're talking about things that should not turn into problems at all in the first place, and we're trying to work towards making these solutions part of the system. I don't want to take up any more of your time than I should, because we'd like to listen to the panelists to the extent possible. We will now move on to Berfu Yalçın. She's going to talk to us about the notion of liberty, notion of freedom and freedom of expression, what could be labeled as freedom of expression. And she's going to be giving us a legal perspective based on European Court of Human Rights and the Turkish Constitutional Court decisions. She did her legal studies in Istanbul University, and she did specialization in European economic law and protection of human rights.
I also want to thank the Hrant Dink Foundation, the Scientific Committee, and the Organization Committee for making it possible for me to discuss a very timely and important matter. I will examine the difference between the European Court of Human Rights and the Turkish Constitutional Court's jurisprudence on the matter of hate speech towards LGBTQ individuals. First, I want to mention the obvious conflict between the freedom of expression and the hate speech. Indeed, the right to freedom of expression has been accepted as one of the essential foundations of a democratic society. And in a very well-known judgment from the ECtHR, namely Handyside versus the UK, the court stated that not only favorably received ideas were under the protection of the Article 10 of the Convention, but also shocking, offending, disturbing ideas were protected by the right to freedom of expression. In this direction, to understand the court's approach on the matter of hate speech towards LGBTQ individuals, I will examine 3 judgments from the European Court of Human Rights and 2 judgments from the Turkish Constitutional Court. And for all judgments, firstly, I will state the facts of the judgment, and then I will try to explain the court's approach on the matter. The first case I will mention is called Westerland and Others versus Sweden. This case is in regard to the state's negative obligation when it comes to the freedom of expression as not to intervene with the freedom of expression. As for the facts of the case, the 4 applicants of the case went to an upper secondary school in Sweden, and they left leaflets in and on the students' lockers. And the content of the leaflets was that the homosexuality was a sexual deviance. It had a morally destructive effect on the society. HIV and AIDS appeared early in the homosexuals, and that the homosexual lobby was trying to play down the pedophilia. Applicants were convicted of agitation against a national or ethnic minority by Swedish authorities, and then they claimed that their right to freedom of expression was violated by the Sweden based on this conviction. According to the Court of Human Rights, although the wording of the leaflets did not directly call for hateful or other criminal acts, they were still prejudicial and they had some serious allegations about LGBTQ people. The court pointed out that the leaflets were left in the lockers of young people and who were very vulnerable and sensitive age at the moment. Students had no chance to consent to distribution of the leaflets. They had no chance to decline or accept the leaflets. And the applicants had no free access to the school premises. Lastly, considering the severity of the penalties imposed on the applicants as they were only just fined and there was no imprisonment, the court found there had been no violation of freedom of expression for the applicants. Although this outcome of this case was welcomed by the human rights activists and scholars, there was a certain criticism around the judgment that the court did not explain whether the wording in the leaflet amounted hate speech or not. The emphasis of the court was rather on the target of the leaflets were young high school students, and they were at a very particularly sensitive age. They had no chance to decline the leaflets, and the applicants had no free access to the school premises. However, it is important to mention the concurring opinions of 2 judges at this point because they specifically referred the transphobic and homophobic bullying in educational settings and the destructive effect of hate speech in a democratic society. In a more recent judgment called Carl Johan Liliendal versus Iceland, the European Court of Human Rights offered a more comprehensive approach on the matter. This application is also in regard to the claims of violation of the right to freedom of expression. The applicant of the case commented on an online news article regarding a proposal on strengthening education on LGBT matters in Iceland. He used derogatory words of sexual deviation and sexual deviance for referring the LGBTQ people. And the Supreme Court of Iceland convicted the applicant to a fine based on his comments on the article. The applicant therefore lodged a complaint before the European Court of Human Rights on the basis of his right to freedom of expression was violated by the Iceland. According to the European Court of Human Rights, speech that does not necessarily call for violence or other criminal acts, but still insulting, slandering specific groups of population can permit authorities to restrict freedom of expression. The comments of the applicant were serious, severely hurtful, and prejudicial. Therefore, considering the substance of the comments made by the applicant, his comments fell under the category of hate speech. This is a very important outcome, especially comparing with the previous judgment that I explained. As I continue, consequently also considering the penalty imposed on the applicant, the court found that the application was manifestly ill-founded and rejected the application. There are two important outcomes, according to me, based on this judgment. Firstly, the court clearly stated that the applicant's comments amounted hate speech. In the first case that I explained, the applicant's comments were targeted to a specific group of young high school students, and it seemed to be the court's reasoning, or one of the most important considerations was that the high school students were targeted to the leaflets. However, in this case, the applicant had not targeted his comments to a specific group of people. He merely commented on an online news article. And the second important outcome of this case is in regard to the Iceland's situation. As a matter of fact, Iceland is one of the top countries in OECD's report on LGBTQ equality, and also top country is in the rainbow maps by the several NGOs. Therefore, it is important that the court chose to find hate speech against LGBT people unacceptable regardless of the cultural dynamics of the country. And this shows the court's strong position against hate speech towards LGBTQ people. And the third case from the European Court of Human Rights that I mentioned is called Bezaras and Levikas versus Lithuania. This case is a little bit different than the first two cases that I explained. This is in regard to the positive obligation of the states as protect from hate speech. As for the facts of the case, the applicants were in a same-sex relationship, and one of the applicants shared a photo of them kissing on his Facebook page. This photo went viral, and it received hateful comments, such as including calls for applicants to be burned, killed, exterminated. And following these comments, the applicants filed a criminal complaint. However, the prosecutor decided not to initiate pretrial investigation. The applicants appealed against this decision, and the district court in Lithuania pointed out that the applicant's Facebook page was public and the behavior was eccentric and deliberately provocative. The applicants complained before the European Court of Human Rights on the grounds of the prohibition of discrimination, the right to family life and the private life, and the right to effective remedy. According to the European Court of Human Rights, sexual orientation of the applicants had played a role in the way they were treated by the Lithuanian authorities, considering they had referred the applicants' sexual orientation and behavior as eccentric and also not in line with the traditional values of Lithuanian family life. Due to authorities' discriminatory approach, the applicants were not protected by the Lithuanian authorities, and consequently, according to the European Court of Human Rights, there had been a violation of prohibition of discrimination, the right to private life, and the right to effective remedy. Importantly, the court emphasized that it will be incompatible with the underlying values of the convention if the exercise of the rights by a minority group were made conditional on it is being accepted by the majority. I think this is a very important outcome, and on this note, I will continue with the applications to the Turkish Constitutional Court. Homophobic hate speech was discussed in two connected cases before the Turkish Constitutional Court. The facts of the cases are the same, but there are two different applications based on the same facts, and we will see why there are two different applications based on the same facts. The first application is called Sinem Hun application. And Sinem Hun is a lawyer of a LGBTQ rights NGO based in Turkey called Kaos Gele. The applicant filed a criminal complaint regarding a shampoo commercial that used a video footage of Hitler. Following the complaint, an online news portal published an article that referred the applicant as the lawyer of the deviants, and it was also stated Sinem Hun, the lawyer of deviants organization named Kaos Gele, filed a criminal complaint against a shampoo commercial. Following the article, the applicant filed a criminal complaint also regarding this article. The prosecution office decided not to initiate a pretrial investigation. Also, the prosecution's office referred the handy-sized judgment that I mentioned at the beginning of my speech. So according to the prosecutor of the case, maybe the wording of the article was offending, shocking, or disturbing for the applicant Sinem Hun, but nevertheless, it was protected under the right to freedom of expression. After exhausting other domestic remedies, the applicant lodged an individual application before the Turkish Constitutional Court. According to the Constitutional Court, although the expression of deviance was targeted at a certain part of the society and at a certain organization, the application was not made by that organization. Considering the applicant as the addressee of the expression of the lawyer of the deviants, the content of the article did not reach the severity of hate speech for the applicant. Therefore, the court found no violation. It is important to mention the dissenting opinion of Judge Paksut in this case. Judge Paksut stated in his dissenting that the lawyers are an indispensable part of the legal jurisdiction and a lawyer cannot be criticized based on whom they are legally representing. Moreover, protection from discrimination and hate on the grounds of sexual orientation is part of the state's positive obligation. Therefore, according to the Judge Paksut, there had been a violation. And I definitely agree with the Judge Paksut in this application. Consequently, based on the court's explanation, it seemed the sole reason of not finding violation in this application was the fact that the application was not made by the Kaos Gele organization. This brings us to the second application to the court, namely application of Kaos Gele. Since the article was still online, Kaos Gele organization filed a criminal complaint regarding the same article, and the prosecutor decided not to initiate pretrial investigation. Finally, Kaos Gele lodged an individual application before the Constitutional Court. According to the Constitutional Court, the news article was not directly related to the applicant organization activities. It was on another matter. And the full name of the applicant organization was not given in the article. Moreover, I want to say I find this part of the judgment very important. Since the day the article was published, there had been no exceptional incidents that would require a more sensitive approach in the interpretation of the online web portal behavior towards LGBT persons or the applicant. Therefore, according to the court, the mere expression of deviance did not amount to hate speech and the court found no violation. I think the last part that I stated was important just because hate speech is not only harmful since it can cause hateful acts or hate crimes towards its subjects. It is harmful just by itself at its utterance because it is derogatory and it creates a subordinate position for its subjects. And secondly, considering the LGBTQ equality situation in Turkey, I think waiting for a exceptional incident. I don't know what can it be, but apparently court is looking for a more of a concrete or tangible attack on LGBTQ people to prohibit or limit the hate speech towards them. So I believe, considering also the situation in Turkey, the court should have followed a more of a rigorous approach when it comes to examining hate speech towards LGBTQ people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, the examples, the cases that we listen to are not always promising, but we know how to fight against such discrimination acts. We empower each other, and sometimes we get positive results. Now we are going to continue with the presentation of Eser Selen, For Love's Sake, Beyond Visibility, Supporting LGBTI plus Rights in Turkey. I had met her before within the scope of a study of hers. At the moment, she works at Kadir Has University. She received her undergraduate degree in Fine Arts at Bilkent University. She has received graduate degree in Fine Arts at Bilkent University and Performance Studies at New York University. She also holds a PhD in the field of Performance Studies from NYU. She has academic work that she carries out. She also has artistic work that she carries out. Today, she is going to present to us a piece of research of hers that has the same title as her speech, and she is going to talk to us about hate speech against LGBTI individuals.
Thank you, Idil. I'd like to share my screen. Am I allowed right now? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Just like it is said, this is a mid-level research, and I'm still working on data collection and data sifting. And this is my pet project. And after my day job at night, I'm doing this work. So it goes a little bit slow, but steady, and I'm committed. So, and because at the heart of this research, there is a recognition that the patriarchal ideologies govern gender relations, defining what constitutes normative sexuality, the moral sexual behavior, and condoning discourses and/or punishment of any who transgresses such morals established under the scrutiny of governmental and sociocultural dispositions. And this presentation is a scaled version of a larger multimodal critical discourse analysis research designed in 4 stages. I applied the multimodal critical discourse analysis as a method. It involves audiovisual and material design and artworks alongside textual analysis following a cultural approach to critical discourse analysis. And it does involve audiovisual and material analysis alongside the textual data and textual work. I designed this research. I mean, it is like an ongoing research, and it is still structuring, but it was like, it started as I wanted to review the newspapers and see what kind of discourses there are, and to understand the LGBTI plus discourses and the state of affairs. And the second part of the second stage is more on the side of the counter discursive strategies and LGBTI discursive spaces. And I did this part, and I researched this part through visual arts and focusing on contemporary artworks, whether it's a video piece or a painting or an installation. But the discourse is quite rapidly and instantly understandable as a counter discursive strategy. And the third stage is still in progress, and I am doing some interviews, very friendly interviews, and to people I know and people I don't know and want to talk to me. And they're like very in-depth interviews, semi-structured. I am right now around 10 scholars, artists, and journalists, as well as, of course, activists, you know, like around this. Very flavorsome, very strong people, and I am very indebted to them. And the other part, and you know, like I'd like to have a understanding of what public thinks and as a social listening, perhaps, and to cover discourses on the digital media, mainly Twitter, but also I will try to understand how web utilizes these discourses and methods and tools such as data mining, qualitative and quantitative analysis, data analysis, social network and content analysis, and data visualization. And in this ongoing research, I have reviewed, yes, the newspapers, and you know, some of the work that I've been like trying to unravel is especially as a counter discursive strategies against LGBTI hateful discourses or hate speech and hate speech acts, because it's never a speeches, it's also resolved in an act. And such as like to demonstrate as an opposition to queer subjectification, such as Zeren's Göktan's performative photographs, like My Deep Blue series, Erin Seyman's New Genital 2. And this is a 2002 piece, very early on. And also I'd like to, I have been like analyzing, I've been thinking through ever since I saw it, Sarkis's installation, amazing installation, Rice and Discussion Place, which is really a place, a discursive space in and of itself. And I am, you know, like I'd like to transform the old political, I'd like to see the transformation. I don't want to, I wish I could, but I can't, you know, like I don't have that much power. Transformation of the, I'd like to review the transformation of old political discourses and introduce some new ones and how it is happening. And I have this presupposition that as contemporary art as a discursive space in transforming queer subjectification, as I said, and the use of indexicals via scholars, journalists, and artists counter discourses on hate speech and hate speech acts. And I am like really utilizing it's very helpful for me utilizing queer linguistics in trying to understand the lexical analysis, making the lexical analysis of hate speeches on word, phrase, and sentence level. Sorry, this is here. So the research aim is practically to critically analyze discourses by government officials, journalists, and then, you know, like moving on to scholars and artists as a counter strategy. And then while the discursive power of these hate speech acts is revealed through the implicit or explicit meanings of images, text, and multiple vantage points, I aim to critically analyze discoursing concerning LGBTI plus individuals and their rights or their lack of, to evaluate how the effect of power relations and inequalities in producing social wrongs, unquote. It is by Fair Clause 2010. I recently published a part of this research in which I analyzed the statements of journalists and politicians between 2002 and 2018 to demonstrate how moral panics about non-conforming sexualities designated LGBTI plus citizens as immoral, and how such panics eventually led to the disappearance of LGBTI plus rights.
Sanırım slide'da bir No. It's
bir anda ekran gitti.
There isn't slide. There isn't any slide. I left it blank, especially because it's coming later. Sorry. And in the, it's called the public immoralist discourses of queer subjectification in contemporary Turkey, where I argued the violence against LGBTI plus communities is based not only on religious but also on secular. That's Freudian slip. Secular discourses. I point to the ills of the nation building process in Turkey. That, as elsewhere, which was based on the exclusion of racial, ethnic, linguistic, religious, and sexual differences as one of the sources of contemporary violence. And I also point to the nonlinear progression of LGBTI plus struggle for rights in Turkey and evaluate the potential existing LGBTI-friendly discourses, some among religious and nationalist constituents in the fight against LGBTI plus phobia. Whilst being a very bite-sized, today I'd like to present an intersectional analysis inclusive of the four-part research findings up until today, not so much of the interviews because it requires another framing, different framing, but I think an intersectional approach is definitely needed to further connect how and whether violence against LGBTI plus individuals is symptomatic of overarching national discourses concerning representation that includes gender and sexual inequality as espoused by those in authority and the reflection of these in the public realm. I use a hybrid qualitative methodology that takes a gender performative approach to the critical discourse analysis. From a queer theoretical perspective, I draw from Foucault's notion of discourse and power and also applied to the sociopolitical arena. The discourse theory of Laclau and Mouffe is very central. And I also, use an expansive tactics of queer linguistics. Around the world, the bodily conduct of LGBTI plus citizens has been called into question by both sides of the religious and secular divide, and Turkey is no exception. For example, in cases of two different camps in moral panic, both Abdurrahman Dilipak, for instance, Islamic, and Hasan Puller's secular discourses claim that homosexuality is a perversion, although the forms in which they present these perversions slightly differ, notably with equal repugnance and as psychosocial afflictions and disorders. Before I further delve into this intricacies and variations of patriarchy and masculinist tradition, I wanted to show you with a more nuanced insight concerning queer subjectification. And this is a painting by visual artist Erinç Seymen. It is an instantaneous representation of the queer subjectivity as well as the scale of violence against women. Mainly deals with femicides. Seymen explicitly depicts conflicting and displaced gender identification in his large format painting portrait, which shows a vagina-like wound slit onto the shoulder of a male body. By having a figure insert the fingers erotically into the cut, the slit, vagina, the artist provokes an indeterminate bodily scene amplified by a corporeal scale. Simplistically, but yet forcefully, the image communicates a queer body which both desires and is absorbed by that from which it is different. And Seymen's painfully eroticized representation of a queer body. displays the force with which the queer bodies in public may be seen and treated in the everyday life. And when these ideals becomes discourse, like spoken by a politician who has held power for a long time now, discourses that denigrate minoritarian subjectivities to the point of obliteration, regardless of whether they're ethnic, racial, religious, sexual, they validate, normalize, and activate multiple layers of violence. While I don't have much time, and I'm going to present a little bit about my pilot study and the progressing study, and which I'd like to cover discourses on the digital digital media, mainly Twitter, by utilizing methods and tools such as data mining, quantitative analysis, and social network content. But I haven't done these. I am starting to, gather the data and sifting through it, cleaning it. And I did a pilot study. Mine Twitter retrieved, 7 tweet sets. Approximately each has 3,000 tweets for the term group, like for instance, LGBT plus decency or perverted or sick or threat or lover, the sevgi in Turkish. And for the pilot study, I limited these sets to the tweets shared between November 2018 and November 2020. I just wanted to see what's there and how will these discourses these discourses resonate my previous research. And I'm shocked right now because it does, like almost, like to the point, and I also obtained further codes and, for cross-check and expansion. And among which, these are the, like the volume of naming processes, but, for trans plus individuals, it is like, the idea of trans as we use them theoretically, or, like as an existence or as a being is not the same. It's not used in the Twitter, in the discourses of hate speech. It is, like the travesti is a, overarching term for the trans, not the trans plus. There is no doubt that it is like a hateful. It's a discriminatory, and it is it's a hate speech, and it's a hate speech act, to be precise. And this is like the discriminatory environments, the noun phrases containing the name, complex noun phrases apparently, in which the terms names occur for each, like sets. And I'm sorry, I can share these, no problem, so later. And these are the proportion of hate speeches, noun phrases containing the names. These are like, the previous slide has the translations. And these are the codes that I obtained in relation to the codes that I had already fed into the data mining process. And these are the ones which are really heavily used among the data I did my pilot study with. And this is the discriminatory environments of all noun phrases containing the name, volume of noun phrases with their percentage in addressing the name. So this governs all of it, the whole, set. And from this, I haven't done any reliability of these data, so don't quote me on these yet, but I will. This was just a pilot study. I wanted to see what's out there. Now I would like to go as far as I can, because Twitter is like founded in like 2006, so it is like really, I'm getting to an end. I'll finish very soon, 2 minutes, 1 minute perhaps. So there are some examples, but one of the most shocking, it's not shocking, I knew already, I follow Twitter. So, the Istanbul Convention and the way how it is reflecting on, LGBTI plus people it is really heartbreaking. You know, there were like instances, you know, just because a woman is getting beaten because she didn't do dinner, we have to get these perverts in and they're gonna get married and stuff like that. It was really, really heartbreaking in all parts of all walks of the society. And the other one is the, you know, the everlasting loot people. And I would like to pursue these arenas probably a little bit more because yeah, I mean, I have to choose and select my battles. So I am still on the verge of deciding, or, you know, verge of nervous breakdown, but it is very heartbreaking. So so I mean, this is my dissonance chart. It's always changing, you know, like for the, you know, like the 4 parts of my research, I am like trying to write, you know, like a little bit of tastes around it, but there are, you know, like you know, politicians claims at some point legal rights for homosexual citizens, homosexual being meaning the LGBTI in the discourse of that, which I saw in the data that, you know, it is an all-encompassing word, like an umbrella word, not the LGBT, but the homosexual, the eşcinsel in Turkish. So and one of the other thing is like, it's always, you know, coming back, equating perversion with LGBTI plus. And one of the things I noticed, intersex is almost non-existent, but, you know, where are the, you know, like the discussion? I'm not saying, you know, like they should be included in the hate speech, but, you know, even in Twitter, there wasn't much discourse, positive, reinforcing, negative, neutral. It's time to talk about that too. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and please contact me if you want, and we can work together.
Buradaki oturumu 3 dakika, 2,5 dakika içinde bitireceğiz.
Now we will conclude this session in 2 to 3 minutes, but Merve is going to take the floor and explain to you that we will have a Q&A session for about 10 minutes in another Zoom room. It is really hard to convey the content of your